Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. Welcome to all of you here in the room and also to those joining us on the Zoom. I'm Luke O'Halloran. I'm part of the steering committee here at Newton for Everyone. And we are as you probably know, a pro-housing organization. We advocate for a diverse array of housing opportunities here in Newton for folks of all ages, means, abilities, and backgrounds. And we here at NFE, we advocate for housing for many reasons when I talk to the folks that are part of our leadership team and our broader membership. Inclusivity of the city, vibrancy of our village centers, the financial sort of sustainability of the town governments. But one of the most common reasons for us as an organization that we're doing this work in the realm of housing is because of climate change. Something that really motivates me when I think about climate change are my two kids. They're 3 and 5. They're both girls. And if you look at the life expectancy tables, there's a really good chance they're going to be alive and in their 80s in 2100. And that's always I don't know why the scientists have aligned on this date, but that's the year in which the consequences of climate change are often projected out to. And I think about Sam and Lily being little old ladies, God willing, in 2100, and I don't want them to be dealing with the harsh projected effects of climate change. I want to do my part, and I think Newton can do its part to combat those more dire scenarios and create a better future that avoids some of that potential downside. And I think we in the broader environmental movement have been using the phrase think global, act local since the 70s. I did look this up today. There's some dispute over who coined it, so we won't get into that. But it's a phrase that's used a lot for a reason. And I think housing is a topic where it's particularly applicable. So at the sort of big picture level, especially in the current political climate, we are fortunate to have good representation in terms of climate change at the federal level. We have Auchincloss in Newton and Markey and Warren who are fighting the good fight and are broadly aligned with the sort of pro-climate movement. They are unfortunately fighting a very difficult fight against the administration in the White House, but that level of our government is in terms of our representation here in Newton, is I think on board, broadly speaking. Where we think there's, and so in terms of making a difference as an advocate, as someone who cares about the climate and wants to do something on climate change in your community, there's a big opportunity in the issue of housing, because that is controlled at the local level, both at the municipal level and the level of the town of Newton, and the state level. The state laws play a really big role there, below the level of those federal representatives. And so that's why we wanted to have this talk, to make this connection to an issue where folks who might have that global perspective on climate change view that as a substantial problem they want to take action on. We want to explore the connection between that and the topic of housing, which is something that you are empowered to take action on here locally without needing to make a work in the bit larger and more complex and currently very difficult environment in Washington, D.C. And so fortunately, we have the perfect guest here tonight who's going to be able to speak to us about this. I think many of you probably know Dan Ruben, but he teaches sustainable hospitality and tourism at several different universities, including Boston University and the University of Southern Maine. He's the chair of Green Newton and leads its building standards community. And he'll be able to discuss the connection between housing and climate change and how more strategic housing development can create a more sustainable future. So after Dan speaks, we'll have some questions, but Dan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. I think this is a really interesting topic. I think you'll find it very engaging. A lot of people care about housing, particularly people who are renters and people who are would-be home buyers, or people who have lost who've seen family members and friends move away because housing is so expensive here. We have a lot of people who care about the climate crisis. But I don't often enough hear about how the two are related. And the two are very related. And that's what we're going to talk about here tonight. The talk is in two parts. The first part is about climate change and about how it impacts housing. And then we're going to talk about housing policy and how it impacts climate change. The talk's about 35 minutes long, and after that we'll have a discussion. I dedicate this talk to the young people in my family, the two youngest members, Elliot and Emmett. May you live a long and good life, and may we enable you to live a long and good life. So, who says that climate change is a crisis? The President of the United States doesn't think it's a crisis. Every year I talk to people who don't think it's a crisis. They say the climate's always changing, as if that means it's not changing faster than it's ever been. So who says is the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC? They represent the 195 countries. Almost every country of the world sends their best climate scientists to this group, and they've been doing it for a long time. This group writes the definitive information about climate change. They're Nobel Prize winners. The IPCC says that to avoid catastrophe, we have to cut our fossil fuel use by 50% by 2030, with a baseline of somewhere in the 2010s, and by 100% by 2050. The sad part is, we haven't cut it at all. In fact, the 2024 was the highest year for fossil fuel use, and 2025 is likely to be higher yet. So we have a real challenge in front of us, one way or the other. So two quick slides. The one on the left shows the rising temperatures since 1850, since the start of the Industrial Revolution, and since our population exploded. It was less than 1.5 billion in 1850. We're over 8 billion now. The slide, so as you can see, the temperature's been increasing. The slide on the right goes back 800,000 years, and it shows the relationship between carbon dioxide emissions, between carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and temperature. And as you see, as carbon dioxide drops, the carbon dioxide being the most important greenhouse gas, as it drops, the temperature drops. As it goes up, the temperature goes up. And right now, the level of carbon in the atmosphere has skyrocketed in recent times, and the temperature is beginning to go up with it. This slide is a few years old, and so that brown line is a lot higher now than it was then. 2024 was the hottest year on record. Before that, the hottest year on record was 2023. The decade starting in 2015 was the hottest decade on record. So it makes one think, how hot will the Earth be in 2050 when Elliot and Emmett are 30, 2075 when they're 55, or 2100 when they're 80? And what are the ramifications of that increasing temperature? You know, so there are many climate change consequences that we face. The sea is rising. 1 billion people on Earth live near the sea. We are having coastal flooding. We are having inland flooding. Think the flooding of Asheville, North Carolina last year. A couple years ago, a third of Pakistan was underwater. We are seeing increasing droughts, wildfires, and water scarcity. Think about the fires in LA. Think about how serious an issue is of water scarcity, because there are regions of the world that are running low on water. We're seeing economic damage from all of this, from droughts, wildfires, flooding. We are seeing health impacts. not only the extreme heat we're seeing, but also the diseases that come from mosquitoes because our areas are getting flooded and there's a lot of standing water, and ticks are moving into climates that used to be colder. We're seeing agricultural damage because of droughts and floods and places that have to adjust. We're seeing food insecurity in parts of the world as a result. We're seeing human migration when people live in areas that are no longer habitable, or where they can't make a living anymore because it's too dry or too wet. All of this brings on more conflict. In human history, migration and water issues bring on conflict. So we could expect more of these conflicts in the coming years. Our coral reefs are in sharp decline around the world. I just read that 80% in this recent bleaching event where our coral reefs turn white, about 80% of the coral reefs are impacted. Coral reefs are very important for the ocean ecosystem. And this bleaching happens because our because our oceans are becoming warmer. And we're seeing lots of species extinction. What's happening in New England? We're seeing more coastal flooding, the occasional house that falls into the sea. And it's not just that the sea is rising, it's rising at a faster pace every decade. Boston understands this. They have a plan, and it's going to be very expensive, and they have to figure out how do we raise money for this, and when do we just make a retreat from the sea. Very serious issues that we will see over the coming years. We're seeing inland flooding, the flooding of Montpelier recently in central Vermont, the flooding of Leominster, Massachusetts. We're seeing the declining snowpack harming our ski industry. We're seeing the warmer waters harming our fishing industry because we have less cod, lobster, and shellfish. And we're seeing and we're seeing more wildfires like we did last summer because of our drought. So what does all of this have to do with housing? A lot. Obviously, if you're in a home that burned down or gets flooded, it affects you personally. And more homes are subject to that. But also it spikes prices for everybody. So in LA, when so many people's homes were burned down, there was an increased demand for housing, and housing prices in LA went up. We will see more of this. I think one of the scariest parts about climate change, and I didn't really realize this myself until recently, one of the scariest parts is the increase in insurance rates and in uninsurable homes. Insurers are pulling out of some of our most vulnerable areas. They're leaving it the fastest thus far in California, Florida, and Louisiana. Insurance is one of the backbones of our economy. When you can't get insurance, you can't get a mortgage. This has very serious consequences. And of course, when insurance rates go up, home ownership is badly impacted. It costs more to live in your home. When we see migration, when we see people leaving one area, that means more demand for housing in other areas and increasing prices. Here's a quote from one of the leaders of Allianz, one of the world's biggest insurance companies. The world is fast approaching temperature levels where insurers will no longer be able to offer coverage for many climate risks. Flooded homes lose value. Overheated cities become uninhabitable. Entire regions are becoming uninsurable. Abraham Lustgarten, I don't know if I pronounce his name correctly, said, "There are parts of the United States that will be very difficult, if not impossible, to either build or maintain a home because of either fires, flooding, extreme heat, or extreme hurricanes. There's going to be 10 to 15 million Americans who need to move in the next couple decades. All of this is to say, we have a crisis. We have a climate crisis. We need to move much faster than we are. We're not in a place where we could pick and choose our actions, where we say, I bought an EV and I'm done. Sometimes we have to do things, including with housing, that might be uncomfortable for us. But that is the position we're in. If we think about the young people in our families, we need to move. So let me give you an analogy. We're all on a train headed for the cliff. There are three kinds of passengers on board. There's a very small group of passengers, and they're screaming, "Stop the train, we're headed for a cliff." There's a larger group of passengers that knows we're headed for the cliff, but they don't think about it very much. And they have 15 issues with the train that are more important than the fact it's headed for a cliff. And then we have a third group, and they don't think we're headed for a cliff at all. And they installed the new conductor. And the new conductor said, we don't have to worry, cliffs are a hoax. There's no such thing as a cliff. And the maps that say we're headed for a cliff, don't pay attention to them because they were written by people in the deep state. And when the conductor sat in the conductor's chair, he put pedal to the metal. So that's where I think we are right now. So that is the part of this talk about how climate impacts housing. Now let's talk about how housing impacts climate. What does climate change have to do with housing policy? Yeah, plenty. Question for the audience. What's the most sustainable city in the United States? New York City. What's that? New York City. Oh, very good. He's smart. Whoops. Yes, New York City. Why? Because people have low carbon footprints. They don't have to get in their car to go places. They take the subway, they walk, they bike, and they scoot. That's a problem. They will be motorboating through the city. Newton is not going to become Manhattan. Boston is not going to become Manhattan. But it's important that we bring our carbon footprint and we enable more people to have a carbon footprint like the people in Manhattan. We don't have to necessarily build skyscrapers. There are other ways to reduce our carbon footprint. One is to enable the missing middle housing. Townhouses, I live in a townhouse, duplexes, triplexes, small and moderately sized apartment buildings, and mixed-use development. But if you do that, we can't say a little snippet here, a couple blocks here, and a couple blocks there. We have to look at this on a more comprehensive scale. So now I'm going to talk about the two archetypes of housing development, the two opposite ends of the pole, sprawl and smart growth. RMI used to be called the Rocky Mountain Institute. It's one of the leading climate change think tanks in the world. And they recently came out with a study and they found that sprawl is overlooked as a major contributor to the climate crisis. What is sprawl? It's low-density housing not built near transit, jobs, and shopping. In other words, you have to drive everywhere you go. And it leads to more driving and higher greenhouse gas emissions. It also, because when we sprawl out, we have to build more roads, more pipes, more sewers, more sidewalk. And that leads to more embodied carbon. Embodied carbon it takes a lot of energy to make concrete, to make asphalt, to make steel. And that energy is almost always in the form of fossil fuel. So when we sprawl out, we contribute a lot of greenhouse gas to the atmosphere and harm our future. When we sprawl, we convert woods and fields and farms to houses and lawns. And by doing that, we harm wildlife. We take away their habitat. And also, when we sprawl out, we chop down trees. And when we chop down trees, we prevent them from breathing in and binding up carbon dioxide, which just makes the problem worse. Heather Hill from RMI, she's one of the authors of the study. She said the study found that urban sprawl is directly or indirectly responsible for a third of all greenhouse gas emissions. Like it or not, if we're going to address climate change, we have to address sprawl. The opposite of sprawl, smart growth. Smart growth means adding more homes, it's the opposite of sprawl, adding more homes near transit, jobs, and shopping. Reducing driving. Smart growth reduces driving, means fewer greenhouse gas emissions. It means more diverse housing, accommodating different income groups, different household sizes and people without cars. It enables households to have one car rather than two cars, or to get around more often by biking, walking, and transit. It also preserves trees because we're not sprawling out. And those trees, and it preserves the trees we need to breathe in and bind up carbon dioxide. Whoops. Looking at these two pictures, which one kills more trees? The forest in the left-hand picture were chopped down for homes and lawns. On the right side, we could see that when we build up, we save trees. When we sprawl out, we kill trees. In those tall buildings, those tall apartment buildings, you don't have to kill many trees per person. You just have the same lot size, but you put a lot of people on it. So let me give you an example. I am fortunate enough to live 5 minutes from Auburndale Center. So I walk to these 11 businesses. I don't drive. I walk to them because they're close. It's just as fast to walk as to drive, and I get a little exercise. I have a 1-minute walk to the bus, which I take downtown. I have an 8-minute walk to the train, which I take to Kenmore Square or downtown. And I have a 17-minute walk to the subway. Now, let me be clear, I bought my home in 1994 when I was much younger. If it were today, I would likely join the exodus of young people who are leaving Greater Boston because they can't afford it, and because it's less cool because young people can't afford it. However, if I decide to stay here today, I would probably have to live much further out and drive everywhere I go and contribute a lot more to climate change. If more people could live in such places like Auburndale and other places that have transit and are close to shopping, it means less driving, less traffic, fewer greenhouse gas emissions. So what should we do as a society to promote smart growth? And let me say, I'll get to Newton later, so this is more globally as opposed to Newton. We need to enable more multifamily housing, more of the missing middle. We need to allow smaller lot sizes. In other words, big lot sizes, single-family homes means more sprawl, means less smart growth. We need to allow smaller unit sizes, smaller setback requirements. We need to end the minimum parking requirements, and I'll get to that shortly. We need to enable accessory dwelling units. For example, those little homes you could put in your backyard that you go to when you want to downsize, or when a family member wants to live there that doesn't want to live in the same four walls as you. We also need to shorten the ultra-long permitting process, which is true in Newton and so many places. It costs, if you want to put up a development that's not by right in Newton, you need to go through the special permit process. It sometimes takes years and many, many thousands of dollars in lawyer costs. You have to lawyer up. And this discourages housing, it delays housing, it makes housing more expensive. Yes, we need a robust discussion, bringing in a lot of parties when we bring in housing developments. But by God, it is just ridiculously long, and it has a cost to that. Some people might say, we don't have to have smart growth, we could sprawl out. The answer is electric vehicles and renewable energy. Now, yes, those two are absolutely necessary to address climate change. However, they're not sufficient. They're pieces of the puzzle, but not the whole puzzle. We don't have, if everybody bought an EV tomorrow, we don't have the renewable energy to power their cars. They would have to be powered by the grid, which has some fossil fuel in it. And when we sprawl out, there's a lot of embodied carbon there. Know that when we use fossil fuel, that stays in, the carbon emissions stay in the atmosphere for hundreds of years, warming the climate. So we have to move as fast as we can, and we have to move in all areas, and we can't say, yeah, EVs and renewable energy will solve the problem. They solve a lot of the problem, but we also need smart growth. Multifamily housing, which is a part of the missing middle, has a lot of advantages. It's much more energy efficient than single-family homes. They tend to be smaller. The heat, when you live one apartment on top of another, or one home on top of another, heat rises. And so you don't need so much energy to heat the higher units in the winter. There's less exposure to the element. I'm exposed on 3 sides, but I share a wall with a neighbor on the other side. Usually means there's, smaller driveways, maybe one HVAC system for several units. It means lower embodied carbon. In fact, a study showed about 40% less embodied carbon. Parking. Parking is a part of the equation. Many communities have mandatory parking minimums. Newton has them, but they're not as severe as they used to be. The law got changed recently. It used to be, I believe, and city councilors and former city councilors could correct me, we used to say 2 parking spots per apartment. Well, if you drive around Newton, you'll see a lot of empty or half-empty parking lots. We built a lot more parking than we need and in the wrong places. Parking lots are expensive, and so we raise housing prices by demanding parking that's not necessary. We could trust developers to build the amount of parking they need to sell their units. They're not going to build too little housing because then they wouldn't sell their condos or apartment buildings. When we overbuild parking, we reduce land where we could be building housing. We reduce open space and we cut down trees. We increase asphalt and concrete with the ramifications I've discussed. And we make our cities and towns much hotter in the summertime because concrete and asphalt heat up a lot. Trees cool the environment, asphalt and concrete heat the environment in the hot summer days. It also increases flooding because water doesn't sink into roads and parking lots, but it does sink into the ground when we don't have parking spaces. The city of Cambridge just passed a very bold zoning law. They eliminated single-family zoning throughout the city. They allow 4-story buildings by right and 6-story buildings by right if they have a particular amount of affordable housing. And they have removed all minimum parking requirements. Good for climate change? You bet. It means a lot more people will be able to live without cars or be able to get around on the subways or bicycle or walking. 3 slides about Newton. Newton indeed, where's Newton with smart growth? We've indeed made some progress. Part of that progress has come about by the state law, the MBTA Communities Act, passed in the Baker administration and passed by the Massachusetts legislature. The MBTA Communities Act requires students to enable, not build, but enable by right construction of multifamily housing close to transit. It's a smart growth initiative. In Newton, we responded, we satisfied the law, but just the minimum. There was a proposal to go well beyond it, but we just did the minimum. And we have we allow more multifamily by right in our 6 village centers and the close by neighborhoods. Better than places like Milton, which are still fighting this law, and a handful of communities in Massachusetts are fighting it. We have passed a lot of housing the slow and expensive way also. Multifamily and mixed-use projects approved by and the onerous special permit process, but indeed passed. And so we do have a lot of housing coming. You know that if you live in Newtonville and you pass the construction. You know that if you live in Newton Highlands and see and pass the site where Northland will be built. Some communities or some developments have enough sufficient housing that they go the less difficult route of 40B. Newton is also, as mentioned, the state passed a strong enabler of accessory dwelling units, and Newton, to its credit, goes a little bit beyond what the state requires. So that's our progress. Whoops. Yet, we have a ways to go. When you look at Newton, some of it's zoned for commercial, there are various different kinds of zoning. For that land that's residential, 64% of Newton is zoned for single-family housing and another 20% for 1 and 2 families only. So 85% of Newton is very restricted, and if you want to build beyond that, you have to go through the onerous special permit process. You can't build by right. So how could we improve the situation? We could enable, by right, multifamily housing in and near not just 6 village centers, but all 12 of our village centers. We could enable more of the missing middle housing throughout Newton. We could reduce the minimum lot size requirements and the setback requirements. We could reduce further or eliminate the minimum parking requirements as Cambridge has done. And we could streamline that ultra-long permitting process. 2 more slides, and then we'll go to discussion. Then we'll wrap up. Let's look at what's happening on the state level. Governor Healy says that Massachusetts needs 222,000 more housing units by 2035 in order to house our people, and also remain economically strong. So she has a 5-year housing plan, and she has, and that calls for zoning changes that are beyond those called for in the MBTA Communities Act. Where should we build those homes to minimize climate change? Not in forests, not in farms, but near jobs, shopping, and transit. So Governor Healy said, boy, we have such a hard time building housing in Massachusetts. We need all this housing, and we can't seem to build it. So she formed a commission called Unlocking Housing Production Commission. Now, they came out with their recommendations in February. The governor hasn't endorsed them or not endorsed them yet. But their recommendations are very consistent with smart growth. They call for eliminating single-family zoning in Massachusetts and enabling small multifamily homes on every lot. Controversial? Yes. Necessary? I sure think so. Eliminating parking minimums for new housing projects and eliminating minimum lot size requirements. In conclusion, we have a climate crisis. It affects our young people. Our young people their futures depend on us solving this crisis. We are not close to solving the crisis. We can't continue to go piecemeal of a little here and a little there. And mind you, Newton has had a lot of achievements. The country and the world have had a lot of achievements, but we're not coming close to saving our children's lives, to enabling them to live long lives. We have a crisis and we're not addressing it. And housing is part of the solution. Smart growth is a necessary strategy for combating climate change and enabling our youth to live long and good lives. Thank you.
Carrie and the Scandinavian Living Center have been great. If you're interested in working with us on other housing issues, hearing about other events we're going to do events on workforce housing, more events about schools in the fall. You can sign up on the website. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Luke.